Welcome to Midlife Women Entrepreneurs, where you'll find real stories, practical strategies, and the mindset shifts you need for entrepreneurship. If you've ever felt like midlife was too late to launch a business, write a book, or chase a dream, think again. I'm Lynette Turner, your host, and I'm bringing you inspiring conversations and practical tips to help nudge you forward and keep growing in midlife. So let's jump in. Malin, we met through some mutual contacts on Instagram. You're a nutritionist. You offer nutritional programs, particularly targeted to women in midlife. I've had an opportunity to experiment a little bit with one of your programs. I thought it was really interesting. So there's a lot of really good information here that we're going to share today on this podcast. But before we get into it, why don't you give yourself a little bit of a back story introduction, and then we'll take it from there.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited, and it's been such a privilege to speak with you beforehand as well. So this is exciting. Yes, as you said, I'm a registered dietitian and a doctor in nutrition, but I didn't start out like that. I actually, when I graduated college, I told my parents that I was never going to study again. And then the parents said, okay, then you need to work. So I went and worked as a parent for a year, traveled a little bit around, and then I realized that I maybe do want to do something different in life. So after a while, I then decided to go back to study, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I got into a school counselor, asked them what could potentially fit me, and they came up with a whole long list of things that I could potentially do. And I crossed them out one after the other, and then dietitian came up, and I was like, that could be something. And with that, I then basically found my passion. That's now 30 years ago. But that was how I started out, with a very random way of getting there, I would say.
So tell me how nutrition, what was it about nutrition that really sort of piqued your curiosity?
Now, looking back, I think that there were a couple of things. First of all, I've always been interested in the body. I think the body is fascinating. I mean, it's the most well-oiled machine there ever is. And it's fascinating to see and to experience how we can play around with our body depending on how we are taking care of the body. So that was interesting for me from the very beginning. And I was thinking about medicine as a potential, but I was more interested and more fascinated by the health perspective rather than the disease perspective. And in the traditional Western medicine, it's much about dealing with diseases, whereas the health promoting aspect is nowadays becoming more popular, but it hasn't been that in the past. And I wanted to, at that point, I thought that I was, more interested in the health perspective. Then I've also grown up with two parents, just like everyone else. And my dad's side of the family, they had such a positive outlook to life. Going there was so much fun, and I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt valuable. It wasn't because life was easy for them, but they had a big heart. They had a home that was open to everyone, and there was always something to eat if you were hungry. Whereas my mom's side of the family was quite judgmental and not open-minded, and life was more about chores and what you had to do, and you had to do this, but there was very little joy. And whenever I went there, I was not feeling very comfortable, and it didn't bring me any good feelings. Having reflected backwards, I think that also somehow shaped my interest for health, because these were two families that came from similar backgrounds, working class backgrounds, who had a pretty tough life, but their approach to life was completely different. And I, from very early on, choose the side from that perspective of my father's family. And that is an approach that I've been living with ever since. And that is much thanks to my grandma.
Yeah. So it's this connection between health and really vitality, right? So what you eat is what you become, kind of thing, in terms of sort of a healthy, that's probably not the right way of saying it. But, so over time, you've just got more and more interested in it. You started to hone in on women's health. Why the interest in women's health?
Again, I would think that my grandma inspired me a lot. She was at that time working outside of home, and she was sharing the job in home or at their place with my grandpa. So from that perspective, she was a very modern woman. And her approach to cooking and to being was always natural and based on, real things that actually happened. So she was a big inspiration. Later on, when I worked as an au pair, I met a fantastic woman in Germany who I still sometimes call my extra mom. She showed me a way where art and science and travels were like open to me and to the world. And that gave me a completely different perspective to what feminine energy was about. She also dressed nicely and she wore nail polish and lipstick and things like that. And I wasn't so used to that. So she showed me a different feminine energy that I also found fascinating. And she taught me a lot about life in general, not only German, which was her main role to start with. So those two women, they have really shaped my interest for women in general. And then I think I've been lucky to be surrounded by interesting females during my entire life. Later on, I then discovered the blessings of having female friends. I didn't know that you could have friends when I grew up. I thought that friends was something you had when you were children. And then as adults, you were adults. But I then discovered that you can have friends and you can have friends that are like family when you become an adult. And for me, that was an eye-opener to figure out that I had someone to lean on that wasn't necessarily my family, but my girlfriends that surrounded me. They were there when life was fantastic, but they were also there when life was not so bright. So I think I've had a lot of good, inspiring women around me, and that has certainly helped.
And so that kind of got you into so there's all these different components of these relationships that you were having with women that you then said, why don't I focus more on that sort of nutritional aspect of it to really sort of connect, who you are as a woman with what you're eating and how you're feeling about life? Is that kind of like where did the connection come from?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's good that you bring me back to the question because there was one missing link there which you identified. That's brilliant. How I then really got into it, it is what you say, inspiration from the women I spoke to and some others. But also then I started out working as the children dietitian. And when we work with children, you work with the families.
Right.
And the main caretakers of families still today in many parts of the world are still are the women and the mothers. And that then got me into how are women as mothers dealing with their children and how is it impacting them when the children are not well. And that then meant that my interest for, females also from my professional perspective was born because women, mothers who look out for themselves, I think are also more able to give the children what they need. And we know from research that women who exercise, they tend to get children who exercise to a much higher extent than when men are exercising, which is super interesting in a society that is developing towards men also being more involved with the children. And women are still those that are cooking more than men are doing, which means that women have a big potential to shape their children's future. But of course, what they're cooking is also what they are going to eat, which means that they are then also impacting their own health. So little by little, from moving from children, then my interest grew for women's health. And I've been doing women's health workshops now for the past 20 years in different capacities.
Okay. And that's what has been the catalyst for you to take those workshops and turn them into programs now that you offer midlife women to take and learn a little bit more about nutrition, maybe move towards a little bit more of a plant-based diet. One of the things that we talked about on our pre-call was this connection between how you're feeling and what your food, what you're taking. But also there was a connection between, well, as people get older, we tend to benchmark ourselves against other people. So for example, I'm in my phase, let's say I don't have high blood pressure, but let's say I have high blood pressure. I might look at that as like, well, that's just something that, we get as we get older. And that was something interesting that you had said is that that's not necessarily true and that we need to move much more to a customized to your body type of program and really understand what works. So talk to me a little bit about some of the programs that you offer. I know that I just went through one program which was feasting while fasting. And that even the name was like, oh, that's interesting. How is this going to work? That was a lot. Take me through it all.
Yes. So I guess there are two questions. One is related to this normalizing what maybe shouldn't be normalized, and the other is program. Do I get that right?
Sure.
Yeah. So when we then look at, this normalizing of what is not so healthy, that is something I think that as a society, when our societies are becoming more unhealthy, the benchmark is moving. So what used to be unhealthy 50 years ago may no longer seem as unhealthy because everyone else is doing.
Right.
That does not mean, though, that what wasn't healthy 50 years ago nowadays is healthy and our body can deal with it. When we look at the amount of, for instance, the portion sizes, I think that is a really good example. The portion sizes, average plate when I was a child was like 17 to 20 centimeters. Nowadays, an average plate, if you go to a restaurant, is 25 to 30 centimeters, meaning that you fit much more food on such plate. And if you have grown up the way I was brought up, then you finish the food on the plate. Then we sit there and eat and forget to listen to our bodies. So what is then happening over time, that will then impact our health. I also meet women who say, okay, I have high cholesterol values, but it's okay because most people have it and that's medicine. I can always take it. And most people don't feel unwell from having slightly elevated cholesterol values. But if we look at it from another perspective, those what we call elevated cholesterol values, we call them elevated because they are associated with a higher risk for developing diseases later in their life. So we have two choices in such situations. We don't say, okay, I have elevated cholesterol values or, blood pressure, whatever it is. Let's take this as a sign for me to actually change something. So I change the outcome. I choose a path that will lead me in a different direction than where I will end up if I continue on the path that has already taken me to the elevated cholesterol values, because that path is very likely when the years pass by and we accumulate the effects of our habits, that habit, those values will most likely get worse and worse until eventually you may develop a disease. Which means that value is giving us such a potential to actually say, let's pull up the sleeves. What can I do? What's within my power to change? And by that, you're then changing the outcome of your health. And by that, you're also then determining whether you want to be somehow, sometimes I call it a victim of your own body, when you no longer decide what you actually want to do because the body is deciding for you, because you haven't treated it the way you should or the way we're recommended to.
Right.
And I think we have so much power, since you have participated in one of my programs and been there, you know that in the past, we thought that genes was the deciding factor when it comes to health and our outcome. Nowadays, we know from studies that 70 to 80% of the health outcomes on a population basis, on a population level, is determined by our lifestyle choices, and only 20 to 30% by our genetics.
Wow. Yeah, because I think that you're right. Like we think like, oh, well, my mom had breast cancer or this had, and we just think it's just hereditary.
Yes, and of course, on an individual level, this is not about blaming anyone, it's not a blame game, because there are people who live 100% healthy, whatever that is, and still get diseases, and they are of course super lucky and unlucky. But there are also people who say, okay, I don't care because my genes are what they are. And there I think that a changed mindset there where we say, okay, I have my genes maybe working against me, but if 70 to 80% is within my capacity to change, why don't take that opportunity, make the most of those and see where it takes me. I may not be disease-free, but I may live a much healthier and happier life than I would have if I just let the genetics decide for me.
Exactly. And I think even too, like just even how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis, right? Like the
Absolutely.
certain levels of exhaustion, or which could be, depression or whatever. There could be a lot of factors going into it. But I think ultimately, from what you're saying, I think that, what I'm putting inside of me definitely is a contributor to the energy that I'm putting out.
Yeah.
So
And exactly what you say is then also then related to my programs that I'm offering, or also when I do one-to-one sessions, is that what we're putting in ourselves is impacting our day-to-day feelings, how we feel on a day-to-day basis, but it's also impacting the long-term, which means that you do something for yourself today and you will feel good today. You do something else, something good for you tomorrow, you will feel good tomorrow as well. That could be chocolate. And I may feel fantastic by eating lots of chocolate today. And I may feel super, super happy. It's just that eating that chocolate on a daily basis over time, that will not lead to health. Whereas eating the vegetables, the fruit, the legumes, etc., choosing for yourself, that will make you feel good today and also tomorrow and in 10 years. And that's a choice. That's a choice.
yeah, no, that's really good. So take, let's go and jump into fasting while feasting. First of all, I just want to say fasting while feasting was just like, or feasting while fasting. Feasting while fasting. Because I was like, okay, hold on a second. Because fasting, I know means no food. But then I went quickly in and I looked at the program like, oh my God, there is actually food in here. And then you have this WhatsApp group that we were all part of, and the photos of what people are making. I was just like, oh, okay. So now I get the name, why it's called feasting, because people were actually eating. But yeah, so take us through the program a little bit, the concepts of the program.
Absolutely. So traditional fasting is often associated with not eating anything. And not eating anything is quite challenging for most of us. It can even be challenging for people not to eat during the day, during the nighttime in a regular situation. So that is challenging. But we also know that some type of fasting, whether that means that we have time restricted eating, so we eat during the days and we don't eat during the nights, or whatever it means, has benefits on our health, or it has benefits on our health. The program that I'm running, as you say, is Feasting While Fasting. It's based on a principle that's called fasting mimicking diet, which was firstly developed in California by a professor there, with the idea that if it's so difficult to fast, that means that people are not doing it. And the benefits that we get from fasting, not all the time, because that's not good, but fasting every now and then, in terms of then our cells being able to repair themselves, we give our body rest, we can activate the fat burning systems, which is good for the storages. We don't want too much fat storages, etc. That we can achieve that without actually skipping eating food. So this is a program where you're then eating less than you normally do. And it's a program where the composition between fat, protein, and carbohydrate is then stimulating the fat burning in your body, because the protein content is very low. So you do this during 5 days. And as you have seen, participants are then eating 3 meals a day, and they are then limiting the window during which they are eating. So with this 3 meals a day and a limited eating window, that means that the body is then remaining in a fasting state despite eating these meals. And then you're reaping the benefits that come with fasting for a longer time period, while you're then also protecting the body by eating, and you get a lot of nutrients and vitamins and minerals from the food because it's plant-based and it's vegetarian. Yeah, plant-based and vegetarian is the same thing. And then people are then starting to feel fine pretty quickly because the food is plant-based, meaning that it's also anti-inflammatory. Once you then start to reduce the inflammation in the body, you then start to feel better already from day 1 or day 2. And then as the days are passing by, we are then activating the fat burning, which means that we then get access to the fat storages that otherwise are quite difficult to get access to unless we are doing a lot of exercise or really make sure that we're resting between our meals, because then we're also burning fat. So this is like a boost. It's not something you should do all the time because it doesn't contain all nutrients that you need. But as a boost, every now and then, the participants are then feeling really well in general.
It was like a little reset almost, so that you can kind of try to work on maybe some cravings that you're having on a regular basis, or the energy feeling that you're feeling. It was interesting to be in the group because I often wondered, what was it like when people were like, oh, I'm starving, and like, oh, what can we have for a snack? And you had some snacks, you offered the snacks as well. But I wondered, like, how much of it is a psychological thing? And then, where you're just like, oh, I can't eat, like, and so now all of a sudden I'm starving, so it was sort of like interesting to watch the people sort of go through the mindset shift of it as well. Like, cause it was a bit of a mindset thing.
Yeah. My experience with the participants is that this is not only a reset for your body, it's also a reset for your mind. And when it comes to, you mentioned hunger and you also mentioned cravings. And those are two different things. They can be the same, but oftentimes it's two different things. Cravings is something that they can come from being hungry. They can come from having a roller coaster metabolically where your blood sugar level is going up and down in mountain spikes, I call it. And that can create cravings when you grow. It can be emotional cravings. You're stressed or you feel happy, or there are other things going on in your life, which means that you may then seek the comfort of eating, the comfort of food. And that is one type of craving. But there's also that craving that is just a habit. When I'm bored, when I'm stressed, whatever it is, I go to the refrigerator and eat something. So cravings is something that is certainly, it can be physiologically, but it's also a lot related to our mental well-being, and our not only the well-being, but the mental state that we are in. When it comes to hunger, that is something that is not dangerous if we experience it every now and then. Many of us do not experience hunger any longer because we eat with such frequency that we never really feel hungry. But everyone who has sat down when they're really hungry, they know what that first bite tastes. I mean, you know that feeling, okay, I'm really hungry, I sit down, I really enjoy the food. And then you enjoy the food up till a certain point, and then it's enough. And during this program, since we are eating less than normal, and there's not the possibility, if you want to follow the program, to go to the refrigerator or have something extra when you want to, then a lot of people are experiencing hunger. And sometimes for the first time in many years. And that is a feeling that can be scary when you're not used to feeling hungry.
Right.
So in this program, there is an element of feeling hungry during the first couple of days. Many experience that. But then since we're then operating on the fat burning system during most of the period, we are then also activating or producing ketone bodies. And ketone bodies, they are suppressing your hunger and your appetite. So once you then have more ketone bodies accessible in your body, that is suppressing the hunger, and then normally the hunger settles. So there is an element of emotional response, and there's an element of physiological responses.
Okay. So the thing though is like you said, it was mostly it's a plant-based program, but you're not necessarily an advocate for only eating plant-based, are you? Or do you, like, what do you sort of believe people should be eating? And I say this because right now I see so much of this sort of primal eating, right? Where people are eating lots of meat, fruits, a little bit of veg, but lots of eggs, grass-fed beef, grass-fed butters, like that primal. It's not necessarily paleo, but it's more this sort of primal eating. And now I feel so conflicted because, you hear the benefits of plant-based, but then you also hear, kind of some negative things about plant-based, but then you also hear good things about primal, but then you also hear bad things about the red meat and the cholesterol levels and all that kind of stuff as well. It's like, oh my God, what am I doing here? What am I supposed to eat? As it is, it's hard enough to figure out what to eat where I'm living right now, let alone trying to stick to a certain way of eating. What's your generally speaking philosophy on nutrition for women in general?
I love your question and also your honesty in this, what am I supposed to eat? Because that is exactly what 90% of my clients are feeling for one reason or the other. I think with all of the conflicting messages out there, you then tend to stick to what you believe, and then people go with that. And that may or may not be right for you. My approach to nutrition in general and for women specifically is that, first of all, choose something that works for you. If you are a meat eater, going to a plant-based vegan diet may be really challenging. I would never ask that from a client, and that is where this personalized nutrition comes in, because we're not so interested in one food item. We're interested in the big picture. What are you doing in general, in total? Because that is what will determine your health long term. We know from science that a predominantly or purely plant-based diet has big positive impact on both health and longevity. There's no doubt about that. But we also know that only changing one meat-based meal a week or two meat-based meals a week also have a positive impact. And what I want to say with that is that when I might meet clients, we then look at what are they already doing. And then we try to build on the good habits that they already have. And if there are then habits that are not so beneficial for their health long-term, and over time, by then implementing more and more of the good habits, the habits that are not so beneficial, they will eventually only happen every now and then, which means that will not have an impact on your health. The important that I think the main thing here is really to see where do you start, because health is not 0 to 100. We're all somewhere in between. And if I meet a client who is eating purely processed food, never cooked, never has a vegetable in her food, then the first step will be to include some vegetables. If I meet a woman who is eating meat on a daily basis, but it's never processed, it's home cooked and it's accompanied by vegetables and other things, maybe the idea then is to go from eating meat 7 days a week to eat meat 5 days a week and increase the legume and legume intake instead during the other 2 days. And in that way, we're then moving both of these people towards something that is slightly healthier. And the important then is, are they able to stick to this? Are they able to live with this on a day-to-day basis? Because if they are, that will have a bigger impact on their health than someone who is going from eating only processed food to being on a diet for 5 days, regardless of the diet, and then going back to where they started.
Right. And probably the feeling too. So what you're saying is you meet with the client. This is, again, this sort of customized approach, right? So you meet with the client, you understand, just kind of, I mean, I think you do ask them to do some tests before, as part of the intake, kind of get some baseline numbers, but then also that sense of like, how are they feeling? How's their sleep? Like you're saying, is kind of a whole system that you want to take a look at. And then from there, then you kind of say, okay, well, she's only eating organic grass-fed meats, but she's eating it every day. Let's see what could happen if you, take and replace maybe even just 2 days with a plant-based diet. And then from there, going from, you've got your dog in the background joining
Sorry
the
about that.
podcast. Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. That's the part of doing these interviews. They're fun and they're authentic. But yeah, so basically, it's then, does it make a difference? And if it does make a difference, if she does feel a little bit different, then, then take and pivot in that direction. So you're not trying to say, oh yeah, like plant-based all the way, you've got to switch, you've got to get rid of that meat. What you're saying is, I work with my clients and coach them based on how they're feeling and where they're at. And maybe you're getting them to check their levels before they start with you. And when I say levels, it's cholesterol, it's blood pressure, all that kind of stuff. And then after 6 months of working with you, or even 3 months of working with you, are we seeing a difference in those levels? But then most importantly, are we seeing a difference in how we feel?
Yeah. I mean, you sum it up very well. And just to add to that, I think what is important here is the consistency, because we know from research, we know from science that swapping 2 meat meals a week to plant-based meals, if it's good plant-based, will make a difference. So we will see results and people will notice results, but you cannot just do it for a week or two. You need to do it for, as you said, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it takes until you then start to notice the changes. And what is interesting, the most interesting aspect of this, I find, is that this is, you swap the meat to legumes, let's say. That does not only has a positive impact on your heart health, it also has a positive impact on your gut health. It has a positive impact on the inflammation. So whatever we are doing is creating systematic changes. So while we may target one area specifically depending on the client's values, we will then also see improvements in other areas of their life. And that requires consistent fine-tuning of your habit, and then you're getting where you want, because what we're then creating is a positive approach to food rather than a restrictive approach to food. And I'm a big eater myself. I love food. I love spending time in the kitchen. I love trying new things, but I don't like when someone tells me what I cannot eat. I want to decide that for myself. And my clients are
right. Exactly.
They are well-educated women. What I do is primarily nutrition education. We go through, okay, you have high cholesterol values. Let's look at what does that mean? What does it look like in your arteries? What is happening to get high cholesterol values? And what could we do to reverse them again? Then it's for my clients to decide, these are the factors that at this stage in my health journey. And then we set the goals based on that. Okay, so you're willing to do X and Y, but you're not willing to do Z. Then we start with X and Y. You go with that. And then the next session, we evaluate that and see, okay, do we need any further steps? What are you open to today?
Yeah.
And in that way, you get that personal guidance.
Yeah. And I like that approach because then it doesn't feel like you're eliminating absolutely everything at the right out. Like it doesn't feel so hard. Like when you're saying keep consistency, well, how do you keep consistency? You have to make it easy for people to just even do it, let alone do it consistently kind of thing, So yeah, I like that approach. So the feasting while fasting is a sort of introductory program. It was, how long was it? I felt like it was maybe 5 days.
5 days. And it's a health promoting program for healthy people. So it's not recommended for everyone. And that is also important, that this is something that should be done in a setting where you know that you can do it. And as you saw, there is also the most important thing here is the safety. So there are people who do this program for 1 or 2 days, and then they eat the meals, but complement it with other food as well. So it is really to give you a boost if you're already healthy. Whereas the other program is then targeted to also people who with different health conditions.
And the name of that program is
Nourish to Flourish, 40 plus
Nourish to Flourish. Yeah, exactly. And so tell us a little bit about that program.
I will start with the name because I think that is worth telling. I had a different name for the program when I ran it the last time, and it did not, people who participated were super happy, but people who read the marketing, they did not understand what the program was about. So it took a lot of effort, just to make. And then someone told me, my friends and a few other people said, but I thought it was this and I thought it was that. And I was like, okay, I've completely failed with the name. That is clear. So this time I then did it differently. I told what the program was about. Then I put it out in a Facebook community that I'm in. And then I asked women to help me name the program. So I came up with a couple of suggestions and I asked women to name the program based on what they knew that the content was. And this was then the name that came out. So that is how women feel and connect. And it was really interesting because there was discussions going on about whether I should have midlife, menopause, perimenopause. Some associate midlife with something super, super positive. For others, menopause is like, can't think of anything worse. So it was interesting to see which associations people got to different words. Another word that I thought was super positive was longevity. And people said, oh, that makes me feel old. And I said, no, this is not about being old. It's about something else. It's quite the opposite. We're trying to, regain the vitality here. So it was super interesting. And the name wouldn't be what it is unless I had all these amazing women voting for the name. And now I think that, the target is clear.
Yeah, no,
So,
that's good. And you know what? Just before you go on, I mean, because this is like to also explain how your business came to life. Like the fact that you reached out to this community to get some help. I mean, that is, because sometimes we sit there and we think we have to build these businesses on an island, or in our own little bubble, but sharing with the community and then also like getting the feedback and then changing the program up based on that feedback. And so it was great. I think that's a great story. Great story.
I mean, you need to, take away your ego part from this and just be open to what actually then is coming. But it has it worked for the feasting while fasting, and it worked for this program as well when it comes to the name. So I'm grateful to all the women who helped me with that.
Good.
Yes, but then coming back to the content of the program, this is then a different approach. So the Nourish to Flourish is for women who are then looking for the long-term change, who are in this game for the long run, who want something better today, but also in the years to come. So we are then basically going through what is scientifically happening from a female physiology perspective when it comes to heart health, gut health, metabolic health, the muscle mass, what is going on in our body during midlife, and how can we then help ourselves with nutrition and lifestyle changes. That does not mean that no one needs medications at some point, because that could still be, and you may want to go down and want to have hormone replacement therapy. Regardless of what you're choosing for yourself that is not related to lifestyle, the nutrition and lifestyle factors are super important during this period. So this program will set you up with the knowledge to understand what is happening in my body and why is it happening, and how can I then work with my body to age gracefully. So for me, it's a pro-age program where you're then also regaining your energy levels, you get to balance the meals, you get a better metabolic setting. And while doing that, as I said before, what we eat, it has a systematic effect. So if we're then feeding our gut, it will also have a positive impact on our brain. If we are feeding our heart, it will also have a positive impact on our gut. So it's like a circular system that we're then creating for women to find that long-term aspects of health.
How long is that program?
This is for 3 weeks, and I think that is basically with the idea that 3 weeks is enough for people to start with these new habits, to digest it, feel the difference, because once you then start to feel the difference, you want more, and then they are ready to move on to the next level and continue with more of the habits or more of the ideas and recommendations that we are speaking about during the program. And it's also long enough to create that community feeling that we're in this together and we are doing this for us.
Right. And so in that program, you offer recipes, just like the feasting while fasting was, we had here's your grocery list. You were able to make modifications based on maybe sometimes you can't find an ingredient or something like that. And so you were offering some nice suggestions as well. So that was good. And that's sort of carried forward into this program as well, where you are offering the recipes, but then possible alternatives to ingredients or something like that as well.
Yeah, and so apart from the knowledge base in terms of lectures and the handouts and stuff like that, I offer a lot of recipes, and also menu suggestions. But unlike the feasting while fasting, people here have the possibility to choose how much do they implement of this, with the idea that if you then go to a restaurant, I mean, there's hardly any of us who don't have any social function or go to a restaurant or order takeout or something during 3 weeks. And then those questions come up, and then we incorporate the theory into practicalities while we are then going out for a meal or whatever we are doing. So during this 3-week period, most people will experience what they then do on a day-to-day basis. They can then ask straight away, how do I deal with this situation? And then you can deviate from the menu. You go out and you enjoy your meal with the recommendations that you have then learned in the course. And for me, this is like the implementation into your real life, because I don't want my courses to be something that you do as an isolated event, and then you go back to your normal habits. I want what we do in the courses, and that is also what my participants will say, are then incorporated into their daily habits. Some are taking
Yeah.
more protein, some are eating more vegetables, whatever it is. And then you get the positive effect.
Yeah, but you'll know, like, if as you make those pivots through, you do the 3 weeks, try to stay as close to the program as possible, see the change, feel the change. And then because then you do notice, right? Like, when you haven't done something to your body in a while, I'll be completely vulnerable here. I love craft beer. I'm a beer drinker, but only craft beers. But I haven't drank in a long time. And so when I did have a craft beer a couple of days ago, maybe 3 or 4 days ago, I had 2. And the next morning, wow, could I feel the difference in like my joints? But it's because I've eliminated it and now I brought it back and wow. Okay. So that's what I think these people will get into. One of the things I was thinking while you're sort of describing the program is like, how do you do it when you have a spouse or family members who maybe don't want to participate in that? Or like, how do you, I do have a friend that, she's a meat eater and her partner, her longtime partner has now turned vegan. And it's kind of interesting because sometimes you can over food or connect by making food together and stuff like that. But now it's a completely different menu, and it's almost like, well, why are you eating that? Can't you just have a steak with me like we used to, kind of thing? So, is there any has that ever come up as how do I handle this, Malin?
Absolutely. And not only with your partner, also with kids, because I have clients who said, my kids, and this is never going to work. But in the end of the day, most of my clients, they then incorporate a lot of the food, maybe not all of it, but incorporate what is working. And there's always the option to then, you cook that food and then you add a piece of meat to the people who want the piece of meat in their family, if that is what you want. And what is interesting is often that if you don't force people to participate, so you don't force your partner to do it, or you don't force your children,
right?
You cook it for yourself. You cook some extra meat that you can then have in the freezer, making it easy for yourself. And then along with that, you're then also adding that meat or fish, because oftentimes that is, what people may look for. And then because if there's then a nice vegetable dish as well, and you also have the grains as you used to have, then there's not much of a difference. And then little by little, people often tend to get curious or at least give it a try. Does not mean that everyone is then going vegan, nor are my clients. But it's a way to take down that barrier, that these are not meals that are so odd that no one can eat them. This is proper home-cooked, tasty meals with a much bigger variety than most people are eating on a normal basis. And in that way, you can then incorporate those principles into food that you used to cook, but you then cook that later on in a slightly different way with the principles that you learn. And by that, both you and your family are then actually getting benefits.
Right. And they may just like it. You never know.
Yes. No. And I have clients clients regularly come back to say, okay, my kids, they are now counting plant points. My partner is now only eating meat when he's at work, but at home we're eating primarily plant-based food. So it is also when you do something good for yourself and that spills over, some of it spills over to people around you, that is positive for most people.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's great. That's great. So, Malin, you have you're doing the feasting while fasting. It's starting again February 2nd. But where can people find you to learn more about your program?
So it's the Nourish to Flourish that starts on February 2nd.
Nourish to Flourish.
And the next round of feasting by fasting comes further on. But you can find me on Instagram under Dr. Malin Health and Vitality. And I have a website, which is my name, Dr. Malin Garimo. And I'm also on Facebook under that name.
Okay, perfect. Well, I can definitely put the links to all that into the show notes. So thank you for coming and sharing your knowledge. And thank you for putting me as part of the feasting while fasting program. I found it was fascinating. And I was genuinely surprised at how good the food was and looked. And it was just still okay. That's awesome. Because, you just don't think that way, right? You just automatically think, so. But so thank you for joining me and good luck with all of your programs.
Thank you so much for having me, Lynette. It's been a pure pleasure for me. So thank you and stay healthy.
Thank you. Will do.